Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Raw Life Health Show. I have a topic today that will interest some of you, and it certainly interests me because, as somebody who eats a raw vegan diet, somebody who's really into health, somebody that doesn't like pain on any level, that's why I do this. I got into this because I was diagnosed with an illness when I was younger, and I started eating a raw diet, and I got better. I want to avoid the hospital as much as I can. And you hear stories about when you get older, it's not going to be as easy to avoid the hospital. Well, I was recently interviewing a guest for the show here. His name is Glen Merzer, and he wrote a bunch of books. And great books, great interview. I definitely recommend you check out that interview. I'll put the link below. But during that interview, this man has been vegan for 30 years, and he hasn't eaten meat for over 50 years. And you'd figure he's healthy, right? And you figure people are healthy that figure this out. Well, there are certain things that you might end up in a hospital for. Accidents, car accident or something. Those things you really, sometimes you don't have a decision if you can go to the hospital or not. But then there are other things that you have to go to the hospital. Well, you should go to the hospital, but how do you get these things? Today on the show, we're going to be talking about a hernia. A hernia. Not something many people think about, and it does it does and doesn't matter what kind of diet you have, because people that are obese are more likely to get a hernia. People that have enlarged prostate are more likely to get a hernia, or any inflammation in general in any of their organs are more likely. But a hernia could happen to a healthy person who's been a vegetarian for over 50 years. A hernia can happen to anyone. You want to keep your body as strong as possible, but apparently if the abdominal walls are not as strong as they should be, you can get a hernia. So I asked this fellow, how'd you get the hernia? And his answer was, to me, shocking. Because I always thought the only way to get a hernia was by lifting something too heavy. So I'm not going to tell you what he said. I'm going to let you hear it. That's what today's about. But I really wanted to take this clip out of the longer interview I did with him, because if any of you have a hernia, most of you are going to listen to your doctor and do what your doctor says. But this man has even more great information about how to treat the hernia, because apparently there's two types of surgeries for hernia, and surgery is always a risk, but according to him, one surgery is much more dangerous than the other risk. So we're going to hear about that today. This is Glen Merzer. Here he goes.
I currently have a hernia. I am going to go for hernia surgery. This is my second hernia, and it'll be my second hernia surgery. The only way to repair, what's that?
I'm just saying, man, oh man, I feel for you.
Well, I'll tell you about it in a minute. But the only way to repair a hernia is with surgery. You can't get rid of it by eating avocados or something. So, but I've even learned with hernias that most surgeons in America, and I mean 99.9% of them, do it wrong. They do not do the optimal hernia surgery repair. So I'm going to Florida to the same guy I went to last time because he does it right. And I interviewed him on my podcast. I have a podcast called The Glen Merzer Show. If anyone out there has a hernia, please watch that podcast, my interview with Dr. Jonathan Eunice, because he does it right. But anyway, in the general subject of doctors, you have to, if you take the attitude that I'm just going to listen to my doctor, you are at risk of being one of the victims of the third or fourth leading cause of death in America, which is medical care. And they call it iatrogenic death. Now, to be fair, some of those hundreds of thousands of people who are killed by medical care every year are very old, frail people, and two medicines interacted in a bad way, and they wouldn't have lasted much longer anyway. But some people are killed at a young age by doctors. And then you think of the terrible crisis we have with fentanyl and these opioids, well, who caused that? Who started giving out opioids like candy? So if you listen, you go to the doctor because you have a head injury from playing football or something, and you listen to your doctor who says, "Here, take this." You may be on a downhill spiral towards suicide. You can't just listen to doctors. You have to, um, uh, go to Dr. Google, investigate things, and make your own informed decisions. The medical record of doctors in this country is appalling because really our health is their report card and our collective health is miserable. We're the fattest, sickest country in the history of the planet. So that's their report card. That's how well they're doing at keeping us healthy. So you can't just listen to doctors. You have to investigate. When you investigate, you find out that the number one thing that they do wrong is they don't study nutrition. And that is usually the number one thing that affects people's health. So when you study nutrition, you find all kinds of benefits to fruits and vegetables and whole grains and mushrooms and nuts and seeds. You don't find any benefits to sausage and frankfurters and cheddar cheese. So why are Americans eating these foods?
Exactly. I always say when a doctor tells you you have like 6 months to live, I say they're only going off their track record. That's
Right,
not a good doctor. Go to a doctor
right,
that say you have like 100 years to live or something, not
right,
6 months to live or something. And
right.
most people that get that diagnosis and make healthy changes outlive their doctor.
Yeah.
You know,
Now, on the subject of hernias, you said you feel for me having to have hernia surgery. It's really not too bad.
twice. Twice. How do you
Twice,
get
well,
it? How do
yeah.
you get it first? How did you get it? Do you know how you got
Well,
it?
it's on both sides of my groin. So good news here, Paul. I only have two sides to my groin, so I'm done after this. Um, I had the hernia surgery, the first one, almost 2 years ago, and I was concerned about how much pain I would have because I made the decision to have what's called open surgery, where they cut you in the groin and repair you in the groin, and sew you up, and then that's supposed to be more painful than the way they usually do it, because they usually do it wrong with laparoscopic surgery, where they make an incision. I think it's somewhere near the belly button where I'm not having a problem. They blow up your belly with carbon dioxide gas, and a robotic arm heads southward and tries to avoid your bladder. And there's any number of routes to potential injuries. And then they put in a synthetic mesh, some piece of plastic that's supposed to, uh, you know, uh, support your hernia repair and keep you from a recurrence. Now that's a lot of risks. Now, when I say a lot of risks, I mean millions of people have this repair and have no problem. So I'm not saying that, there's a 90% chance you're going to have a problem. But there are a lot of risks to this because, for one thing, some people react badly to that mesh or it migrates and causes tremendous pain. All you have to do is Google hernia mesh lawsuits, and you get the testimonies of some people who've had either the surgeon made a mistake or they just had a reaction to the mesh. Um, and other people are injured by the laparoscopy, by that robotic arm, the bladder is injured or whatever. So why take those risks when it's not necessary? And there's a repair called the Shouldice repair. It was formulated in Canada. There's still a Shouldice hospital in Canada that does this, where it involves none of these risks. But because it's open surgery, I was told, oh, expect more pain. So I never take a painkiller, but I can't swallow a pill even. But I got a bottle of liquid Tylenol in case I needed it. And I had the surgery. And it woke up in the recovery room, and I said, "There's no pain." And the nurse said, "Well, of course not. You're still under the effect of the anesthesia. Wait till tomorrow."
Uh-oh.
And tomorrow came and there was no pain. And there
Wow.
was no pain the day after. And there was no, I never had to take an aspirin, Paul. There was never any pain. So why is that? Well, maybe it's that CRP score I had. If you have low inflammation in your body, you're less likely to have pain. So here, even my diet protected me on the hernia front. It protected me. It made my hernia surgery go better. Um, but why do they do the riskier technique on 99% of people? And the answer is, I think, because it's easier to train doctors on that technique. It's a one size fits all for everybody, and particularly for an obese population, because the correct technique, the Shouldice technique, cannot be done on obese people. So it takes more training. Surgeon has to be more skilled and trained specifically on the Shouldice technique to be able to offer that technique. And so a system has come up in this country where surgeons are trained to general surgery and then to specialize in hernias. And so they're trained in the one size fits all laparoscopic hernia repair. They are told that, and they tell patients that that technique has a lower chance of recurrence of your hernia. My local surgeon, who I didn't go to for the operation, told me when I asked him, "Why do you use this mesh?" He said, "Lower chance of recurrence." I said, "How much lower?" He said, 50%. Well, that sounds significant, doesn't it, Paul? 50% lower chance of recurrence. I
Absolutely.
said, "Is that in relative terms or absolute terms?" He says, "Well, I guess relative." I said, "Give it to me in absolute terms." He said, 1% chance of recurrence with the mesh, 1.5 without the mesh. See how that's 50%? It's a 1 in 200 difference, but he makes it sound very substantial, 50%, right?
Yeah.
But not only that, first of all, I think they're wrong about that because the Shouldice Hospital says we have less than a 1% chance of recurrence. So, in any case, it's a very low chance of recurrence in any event. But if you do have a recurrence, which everyone admits can happen, either way, do you want to have your hernia repaired again with a piece of mesh in you with tissue growing all around it? Or do you want to have a clean repair as I would if I had a recurrence? That's a huge difference that they don't tell you about. You're setting yourself up for a really risky,
So they leave
difficult
the
thing.
mesh inside you after the
Yeah,
surgery?
if you have the mesh inside you and your hernia repair fails, you've got a mess on your hands. That doctor has a very difficult, complicated repair to do now. He's got to somehow remove that other mesh without injuring your organs and your nerves and put in a new piece of mesh. It's a mess. So when they tell you less chance of recurrence, you think they might have the decency to tell you, but if there is a recurrence, you're better off without the mesh. They don't have the decency to tell you that.
Wow. So how'd you get a hernia?
I sneezed.
Come on.
No, yeah.
So
Look,
you
what happens
sneezed.
is as you get older, if genetically your abdominal wall is not so strong, you can sneeze or cough your way into a hernia.
Wow.
Yeah.
I always thought it was some lifting something super heavy.
No.
So, and did you know right away?
I didn't know right away. I sneezed. I went, ow. And then I looked in the mirror and I saw it.
Wow. And
Yeah.
how long from there did you go to a doctor?
Shortly thereafter, went to the local doctor, but it took me some months before I decided to go to Sarasota for the surgery.
You must have been up all night that night checking Dr. Google to find out about all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Because
Wow.
I thought a hernia, oh, that's easy surgery. Well, it's not like having a tumor removed from your lung. It's not a super serious surgery, but it turned out to be more complicated and more, you know, a more difficult decision than I expected.
Besides the place in Sarasota, what the other place that did this surgery?
There's a doctor on Long Island who does this surgery. I think there's one in Texas and there's one in Cleveland. There are 4 or 5 doctors in America who do this correctly.
Where do you live now?
I live in the Midwest.
Okay, okay. So now what happened on the other side? A sneeze again?
I don't know. Could have been a sneeze, could have been a cough. I don't,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know.
And like reoccurrence. So what is a reoccurrence? It's like the
Well, when it,
possibility you could sneeze again and you could have a reoccurrence.
yeah, if it comes back.
You see
But the
this?
thing is, my surgeon in Sarasota told me if it reoccurs, it's a shame, but he can just do another Shouldice repair again without mesh, and I should be fine. So I don't have to worry that if it reoccurs, I have a nightmare on my hands. I just have another surgery.
Sure. And this is important because there are people out there like myself that take health so seriously. And you're like, I'll never go to a doctor for anything. And we think, we're not. But sometimes accidents, car accidents happen, and sometimes things like this happen. What I tell people, Glenn, is while your mind and your thinking is in the right mind, you should make a decision of if certain things like this happen, this is the way I'm going to deal with it. Because
Mm-hmm.
like if a doctor tells you, God forbid, oh, you have cancer or something, your mind, even though how much our minds just they do really good psychology, would be like, oh, and then when somebody tells you you have 6 months to live unless you do something, your mind switches and your thinking switches. But if you make that decision when you're under really like smart thinking, you're gonna say, regardless of what they tell me, this is how I'm gonna handle it because
Right. And
it's
if anyone ever tells me that, Paul, I'm calling you.
very good. Please do. Please do.
Yeah.
Because I help a lot of people
Yeah.
in that situation. And
Yeah.
places like Hippocrates Health Institute are there to just do blessings for people. And if anyone ever has a hernia, I'm sending them to you to get information.
Thank you. I'll send them
Yes.
to my doctor.
Yes.
I'm not repairing any hernias.
This is what these interviews are about because we need
Mhm.
to know this, and very few people think about this. And it's definitely good to remember you and what you're doing. All right, everybody, that was Glen Merzer. I'm going to put a link below to the longer video I did with him, but definitely something to consider. I figured I'd put this interview part on the internet separately, so if somebody has a hernia, and hopefully it'll pop up and they'll make a wise decision when doing the surgery for dealing with a hernia. I learned stuff, and that's what these videos are about. All right. Thank you for watching. I'll put Glen's contact information below, or at least his website and his podcast below, because he has other interviews about health. And check him out. He's written 15 books, so he knows or 16 books. He knows, or co-authored them, but he knows what he's talking about. So check them out. Thank you, Glen. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Please put your comments and questions below, your experience dealing with a hernia. And until then, everybody, have a great day and a great world life.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Raw Life, brighten up your life.